Hello, I should be live. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well this morning. I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes because I know there's going to be a few people that need to join, so we'll start, just in a few minutes. Hi, Ed. Hi, Tom. Hi, Sujinda. Hi, Lauren. Hi, Cassandra. Hi, Essa. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're ready to learn about Core Web Vitals. Stefan, hello from Vienna. Oh, it's nice to see there's so many people here. It's great. Yeah, I'll just give it about 3 minutes past just to make sure we've got enough people in, and then I'll start cracking on. Oh, wow, 50 people here. That's a lot. Right. Okay. It's 1 minute past now, so I'm going to start. So I'm going to share my screen. That's too small. There we go, everyone. So today I'm here to deliver a webinar around Core Web Vitals. So a little bit about me first. I'm Charlie. I'm a technical SEO consultant for Impression. I have a background as a web developer, so kind of have really lent towards technical SEO as kind of my discipline. And I'd say I've got definitely a passion for web performance, which really kind of fits nicely alongside the Core Web Vitals. So today, a bit of an agenda. So before I kind of start going through the agenda, this talk is going to probably be covering quite a few areas. I know that Core Web Vitals is quite a technical subject, but I'm aware that probably there's some different knowledge levels here in this webinar now. So what I'm going to try and do is make sure that kind of I go through the basics to start off with, but then kind of whilst I'm doing that, try and make sure that I'm keeping in mind that, there might be some people here that are actually having to implement these recommendations or maybe having to go in all of them do themselves. So probably they're hopefully going to be a little bit for everyone here. So in terms of agenda today, I'm going to go through what Core Web Vitals are, why they're important, they are important, how to measure them. I know that's a question I've had a few people emailing me around before this webinar, just wondering like the best way and how to get the best scores. Common issues, pulling out a few things that I've seen be quite consistent off a few sites. Hopefully I can give you some ideas around them. And then finally, a bit of an auditing process. So now this bit will be fairly in depth, but I think it's just a good idea that ideally when you go away from this webinar, you will have kind of a good idea how to approach starting to get some of these issues fixed. Perfect. I will have a Q&A at the end, but if anyone wants to ask questions as we're going through, please feel free. And then maybe I've got a kind of section at the end where I can just run through everything. And if I see anything that I can answer at the time when I'm going through, I'll make sure I do that. Cool. Okay. So first off, Core Web Vitals, what are they? So the Core Web Vitals make up some page experience metrics. So Google announced these last year. They called them the page experience metrics. And on the right-hand side, you can see what they're made up of. So at the top, you have the Core Web Vitals, the three of them. So loading, interactivity, and visual stability. Then underneath that, you've got another 4 metrics that make up page experience. So mobile friendly, is your website mobile friendly? Now, hopefully most people have a mobile friendly website here. If not, you can test the mobile friendly tester and have a look, but that's always been a ranking factor. Safe browsing. Yeah, again, here, I'm hoping no one's got any phishing websites and use any malware. So most people should have a safe browsing website. And if you don't, Google will let you know about it. HTTPS, so does your site have an SSL certificate? Yet again, most people now are running an SSL certificate. And the last one, no intrusive interstitials, try and say that right. So that's making sure that there's no kind of large, big banners when you're loading a site that overlay all the content. So there are 4 parts of page experience that I think most people are covering off anyway now. But I think the new part of page experience are these 3 metrics at the top. So loading, interactivity, and visual stability. So what I'm going through today is like how we can audit them, understand them, and hopefully do them better. but page experience is actually the summation of all of them together. So core vitals, those top three, they're made up of three different metrics: LCP, largest contentful paint, which effectively measures the loading speed; FID, first input delay, which measures the kind of interactivity of a website; and CLS, cumulative layout shift. There's a bit of a mouthful, but that's kind of that's how much the visual stability of a web page when it loads in. Now, there's different metrics for each of these. So LCP is scored in seconds, FID is scored in milliseconds, and then CLS is kind of a metric that Google have made their own algorithm for. But you can see underneath those images, there's kind of three different kind of buckets where you can sit. So good, needs improvement, poor. Now, what I'll say here is that Google are quite strict with this. So, getting that good score is quite difficult. Like having the largest element load on a web page under 2.5 seconds is a challenge. And I don't think there's many websites that, get 100% of their users loading the website that fast. And that's probably the same for CLS as well. So we do have to take into account here that Google are fairly strict with some of these scores. So first one, largest contentful paint. So this is a measurement of when the largest content element is visible within the viewport. So when I'm saying viewport, I'm meaning whatever size that browser or mobile device that you're using is the initial kind of load that you load it in. So here's a really nice image that actually Google created to show when they measure the LCP. So in that first image, you can see them measuring the first contentful paint underneath that. So FCP, that's basically when the first contentful thing appears, which can either be a bit of text, an image, or a link. So you can see at that top bit, the visual stories breadcrumbs started to load it in, and it's measuring first contentful paint from there. And as it starts to move on, you can see as the web page loads in. So the next bit it loads in is the H1 tag, who was qualified for the September debate so far. And you can see the page starts to populate over time. And right up until that last image, the H1, that top piece of text is the largest contentful paint. Then right at the end, it loads in the images of the now president. And then the page is finished loading. The largest kind of element on that page now is that image. That's classed as when the largest contentful paint loads in. So anything before, so basically it's like a timer. Until that image loads in, that's when it's classed as that largest contentful paint is loaded in. So this can be an image, a video tag, or any other block level HTML element. To be honest, most of the times I've seen across vast majority of websites, it's either a banner image or a H1 tag. That's the vast majority that I've seen. So the next one, first input delay. So this measures page responsiveness during load. Such it focuses when you load in a page and you click on, say, do a scroll or a key tap or a press. So if you have a look here, hopefully this video will work. You can see I'll wait for it to loop round again. But what this is it's the delay that when someone's clicked on the kind of an element on your page and how long it takes to react. So I'll just play that again. So if you watch, the person goes away, clicks on that button, the browser goes away and works on its main thread, and it's basically how long that browser is taking to understand, to start to, pass that whatever you've done and start to kind of respond to it. Now, what I'll caveat here is that I think most sites are doing this really well at the moment. I think this is probably because the vast people here will probably have very fast phones and be using fast devices. So what that means is that phones are so fast now that the first input delay is very minimal. So the vast majority of sites have checked are scoring really well on this. So hopefully this isn't something we have to kind of delve into too much. Next one, CLS, cumulative layout shift. So this measures the total layout shift on a page. So Google come up with this kind of complicated fraction score. So layout shift score equals impact fraction times distance fraction. Luckily, we don't have to worry about that. What we can worry about is they give us a nice score, and you can see how that's generated. So on the right-hand side, there's an image that, again, Google provided, and this shows you a page where CLS is occurring and when CLS isn't occurring. So on the left-hand side, you can see that someone is loading that page. There's a picture of a dog holding some balloons. They've gone to click on that picture of that dog, but then suddenly, as they've done that, the browser has loaded in a banner image, so it could be an ad to somewhere, that's pushed the image of the dog down, and someone's ended up clicking on the wrong link. So what that's done is that's shifted the layout because that's loaded in kind of as you're trying to click on something, and then that gives you a certain amount of layout shift. So you can see that it is a score of 0.44. On the right-hand side is an example where that isn't occurring. So you can see what they've done there on the right-hand side is they've made space for that banner. So that dog is actually pushed down a bit on the initial load, and that banner has room to load in. So that person there, very happy, they can click on the picture of that dog, no ad going to get in the way, there's no layout shift. Now, that's a really basic way of describing layout shift. I think layout shift is something that is going to be a hot topic, especially when the core web vitals are released. But hopefully I'll start to delve into that a bit more as we go through here today. Perfect. So we understand what the core web vitals are, but now we need to know why they're important. So to do that, we can go back maybe a couple of years to understand how Google started looking at page speed. So Google had an imaginatively titled update called the Speed Update back in 2018. That was one of the first times where they were starting to look at how fast a web page was on mobile. Now, for me, this was quite a big thing. I was like, okay, finally, they're like, all this work we've been doing to make sites fast is going to see ranking increases. But I saw very little, and it seemed like it only affected the very, very slowest websites. So whilst they announced this, I actually think it was very minor, very, very minor. But then kind of as we go through this, we can start to see it now. As of last year, they announced page experience metrics, and core web vitals are part of that. So they were announced around this time last year as a ranking signal. So what that means is that page experience now being a ranking signal, in November, it was announced it's going to roll out in May 2021. So those scores that we've got, I mean, we know that most sites are doing mobile friendly, they're safe, they're using HTTPS and they're not using interstitials. So those core web vitals are a really key area that we can start to see some ranking boosts from if we can, start to improve them. And now we know this is going to be a ranking factor. It's something that definitely we should all be focusing on if we are responsible for traffic on a website. So just to double down on that, actually, this was some content that came out in the community the other day. So Google had accidentally seemed to update one of the help center and they put this kind of documentation on there, then took it off quite quickly. But if you read the red text underneath, it says, pages that pass all metrics are considered to have a good user experience on mobile devices and can get a badge, and importantly here, and in future will be eligible for a ranking boost in mobile search results. So Google are telling us that if our websites are passing these metrics, you'll get a ranking boost. Very rare that Google will use terminology like ranking boost, in my opinion. So it's good to see that, there is something that we can definitely focus on here. There is another really key part here as well. So as well as a ranking boost, you also get a nice badge. So pages that pass core vital thresholds, so when they're released, you're going to get this nice badge. So if you see on the right-hand side, I'm not too sure what it is. I think it's a star within a circle, but if you look at the top where you have the URL breadcrumb, so backlinko.com, hub, best practices, you get a nice little badge there. So it's subtle, but then maybe kind of over time, if our websites are passing those page experience metrics and have good core web vitals, that might become synonymous with a good page experience, and you could start to see an increased click-through rate on mobile search. So on that as well, if I go back a slide actually, so core web vitals, probably a bit of devil in the detail here. In that last part of that sentence, it says in mobile search results. So there's been some debate in the community what devices are going to affect. Actually, it's going to affect mobile search results only. So if you won't see a ranking boost when people are on desktop search, it is only on mobile, which is interesting, but it makes sense, I think. So final bit on why they're important. So they're measured on a per page basis. So it's not good enough just having, okay, my homepage has amazing core web vitals, so put all this work, great. If you think your site is, it's the sum of all its parts. So if your category page is slow, you have a service landing page that is slow, then that is not, they're going to be scored individually. So it's not good enough just making sure you have one fast page. You need to make sure that every page that you want to rank strongly in search has a really strong set of core web vitals. That's a really important one, just to make sure that we're kind of focusing in the right area. So that's why we know they're important. It's a ranking boost. I've very rarely see Google use that kind of terminology. So next up is, how do we measure them? How do we go away as kind of people in digital marketing to make sure that we're getting a really good understanding of how our site's performing? So the way that Google collects these core web vitals is, it's not, they don't just use a Google bot to go away and do this. They actually use this big database that's called the Chrome User Experience Report. So what this is a huge database that Google collects. Anytime you use a Chrome device and you go on a website, you send a small bit of data back towards this Chrome User Experience Report, and it basically stores all this real-world data of your users. So it's important to note that you're not just optimizing for Googlebot here. Actually, the experience of your users are influencing these metrics, which is good because scoring real users rather than machine is definitely like a much better way. But key point here, it's a massive database that we can all go away and look at. So how do we go and query this database, and how do you kind of check what our scores are? So we can use the Chrome User Experience Report, and Google have made this amazing dashboard. So if you look here on that link there, I'll share this around after, but this is a link where you can click on and you can basically go away and generate this dashboard. It's a Google Data Studio. You feed in any link and you get this really nice looking Google Data Studio. On the right-hand side, you can see how your site is currently scoring for its Core Web Vitals metrics. So largest contentful paint, first input delay, cumulative layout shift. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that split between desktop and phone. Now, for this, definitely because Core Web Vitals are affecting mobile search, the mobile is what you want, is the place you'll want to be, is the place you're going to want to be looking at. So even though here, actually, this site we're looking at looks like it has a really bad desktop score, actually, is that going to affect the ranking boost that page you're going to see? Because we know that it's kind of only effective in mobile search results. So it's always worth here, make sure you're focusing on the mobile as the one if we are looking for that ranking boost. So yeah, anyone can go away and create this. I'd recommend going and doing it straight away. Like after this, if you haven't done it, go away and get that dashboard created. So not only does this dashboard give you, so this is for the whole domain, by the way. So it gives you the score for the whole domain at the moment. But not only is it just for, for that month, that score, actually what you can do is start to drill down into month by month. So you can see on the right-hand side here, this is for cumulative layout shift on the phone for a website. So this goes from January last month right through to April 2020. And what you can see there is that's really nice for kind of something that's, it's a really good way to illustrate is that we can see in July 2020 that something happened on the site that caused the cumulative layout shift to change. So already we're starting to get some insight from this dashboard that kind of tells us, okay, we know whatever happened at that point, that we can go back and look through and make sure we fix that. So where this is coming from, actually in this instance, it was the client moved from Magento 1 to Magento 2. And actually it seems to have some impact on layout shift. I believe it's to do with the plugin that they're using. But this is a really good way to illustrate. You can see where things started getting worse or started getting better. Yeah, again, I recommend everyone do this. So the next one as well, where you can score the Core Vitals is through Chrome Developer Tools. So this image is very small on my screen. What you can do is, if you open up Google Chrome, you press Inspect, you can go to this Performance tab and you can run a test. So if you click on, when you run this, hopefully you can't see you can see my cursor. If you click that refresh button, it will go through and run this test for you. And you can see underneath you have the list of scores here. So you can actually click on that larger contentful paint element. If you look right to the bottom here, you can see the bit that they're using to score your larger contentful paint. So this is really handy, just going through and understanding, okay, what elements across all my templates are being used to score the larger contentful paint. I'm being a bit arrogant here and using a picture of myself, which probably isn't the best thing. But yeah, you can see that on the impression homepage, the picture is being used to measure the LCP. So that's a really important thing to do, that if you are going away and thinking about your Core Vitals, go through and have a look and make sure you understand which elements are driving that. So next one, Chrome Developer Tools, you can also use the inbuilt Lighthouse test. So I have done a GIF here, but it is going quite fast. But if you open up Chrome Developer Tools, you can run a Lighthouse test that will go through and start to show you, so wait for that to run. You can see I'm running that on the website. So it goes through, runs the Lighthouse test. And if you scroll down a bit, you can actually start to see all the different metrics that you have for the Core Web Vitals. So hopefully I'm going to scroll down in a second in this GIF. Yep, so you can see there it's got larger contentful paint, the total amount of cumulative layout shift. So what that helps is that you can go and run this Lighthouse test maybe across all of your key templates. So I'd recommend doing your homepage, your category page, anywhere that you want people to land on. Go and run this test to make sure you understand that. In that GIF there, you can see that it also highlights the elements that are contributing to layout shift. So say if we go in that dashboard and we're seeing there's elements that are giving layout shift, you can run this test and go and make sure you understand actually what's causing that. So another one, Search Console. So I had a few people email me about Search Console around how can you use this. So Google actually have a tab now called Core Web Vitals in Search Console, where you can click on and it gives you an overview of mobile and desktop. And it basically groups the URLs into buckets of poor, needs improvement, and good URLs. I've seen very few URLs and good URLs across a lot of sites, which is strange. But this is okay for tracking performance, but I wouldn't use it as kind of the be all and end all. And that's because actually when you start to drill down into this, so if we want to go and see those list of URLs, actually, when you click on it, it starts to group those URLs together. So I've gone and looked in Search Console to see which URLs have a large contentful paint longer than 2.5 seconds. Now, if you look in that second row, we can see that it's grouped 462 similar URLs together, which for me isn't very useful because those 462 URLs, you only get a selection of 20 of them to look at, and probably that's 5 different templates. So definitely use Google Search Console as a bit of I guess, guidance, but don't use that as your primary place to measure it. If you are measuring things, try and make sure that you're using the Chrome user experience report. PageSpeed Insights. So hopefully we've all used PageSpeed Insights before, but this is where you can go and feed in any URL into your website and it will go away and tell you all the different PageSpeed metrics insights for it. This also has the Core Web Vitals in it. Now, we have to be careful with the way that we use PageSpeed Insights. So there's two parts to it. So on the right-hand side, you can see with Test the Impression site, great, it scored 82. But you can see in the field data, so there's two parts of data here. You have field data. So that field data is actually real-world data from the Chrome User Experience Report. So that's actually your real-world users. And underneath that, you have lab data. So that lab data is run on a test on your machine. I think it's really important to note that there is two separate bits of data here that when you go away and run a PageSpeed Insights test. And hopefully now I'm going to show you how kind of that can have an impact on your overall scores. So here we've got a website that we used to work with. So we can see we've tested their homepage on desktop and mobile. So the desktop version is scoring 83. The mobile version is scoring 18. Now, the reason it does that is because the mobile version, the mobile browser that Google use to test on PageSpeed Insights is a Moto G4. So it's a super old phone that not many people are using. So they actually kind of, the mobile scores are a bit of a red herring sometimes. So I know that I'll have their clients come to me and say, okay, we're getting, what is it like, 10 on mobile PageSpeed, on mobile score. Actually, you go and look at the Core Web Vitals in the Chrome User Experience Report and they're okay. So this is a really good example of it. So if you look on the right-hand side for mobile, you can see in the field data of largest contentful paint, they have 3.4 seconds. So that's right in the middle of needs improvement. So we think, okay, that looks okay. If you go and look at the lab data below, that's 11.1 seconds of worth of largest contentful paint. So definitely when you're using PageSpeed Insights, use the field data. Now, not every URL in PageSpeed Insights will have field data available for it. So just be careful with that. Sometimes it will say there's not enough here and it will give you the lab data. But just be careful using the lab data because it's a bit of a red herring sometimes. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions around that, please feel free to ask. Crux comparison tool. This is an amazing one that one of my colleagues, Helen, showed me. So this is where you can go in and feed in a list of URLs to start to benchmark you against your competitors. So here I've just put in a list of URLs. But what I'd recommend probably this looks like to most of you here is going through, okay, say I've got a service page and I'm ranking position 3 and I know these Core Web Vitals are coming. Go away and put all of your competitor service pages that you're competing against into this tool. I'll send the link after. But what this will let you do is go away and actually benchmark the individual scores. So you can see here, what we'll be able to do is think, okay, right, we know these metrics are coming out. How are we scoring against our competitors? I think that's a really good way that if you are scoring badly, it gets buy-in from maybe people that aren't so technical because you can show them some scores against the competitors. Yeah, these are all default dashboards. None of this is custom. Yeah, I'm not into custom stuff. A lot of this is all off-the-shelf things that people provide, which is really nice of them. Screaming Frog. So as of yesterday, I'm not too sure if everyone has Screaming Frog here, but if you do, now Screaming Frog lets you crawl a website with the Core Web Vitals and it pulls them out for you, which is really handy. So you can go away and actually crawl a website, use the PageSpeed Insights API, and you can see on the right-hand side here, this is a tweet they put out yesterday. Basically, this means you can get en masse URL data for the Core Web Vitals. So say if you want to go and test a site and think, okay, of maybe these, this site, how many of my pages are passing the Core Web Vitals at the moment? So this is really handy. And if you do have Screaming Frog, I'd recommend looking into it. As well as that, Deep Crawl. So Deep Crawl is another piece of crawling software that say if you want to crawl a website and look at it en masse, Deep Crawl will let you also go and do that. It's fairly cost prohibitive, Deep Crawl, but it's just worth mentioning if anyone does have it here, make sure that you are looking at it. Okay, so hopefully there we know what they are, why they're important because our ranking factor, and then how to measure them. Now, I think that's kind of suite of tools that have gone there. I think that's enough, definitely, to start to get that under kind of initial set. I just saw a question from Lex there. How come we don't get sufficient real-world data even though we have thousands of visitors a month? Now, that's something I'm not too sure, and it does seem to be a bit random that when Google go away and give you some of these scores, like some pages I've checked that I think they should have field data, sometimes they don't. But I think what you can do is there is a way that you could go and use you can use BigQuery to do that, but maybe that's probably for another talk because that's a little bit more advanced. You can actually query the database manually. So some common issues that we've seen. So Impression, actually Ed, who's watching me at the moment, recently analysed top publishers around the world to understand how they're performing for Core Web Vitals. We did this study that we created, and you can see on the right-hand side, we started to kind of benchmark how all of these different publishers are performing at the moment. So you can see we've got LCP, first input delay, and CLS there. So we can see Lequip, hopefully I've got not butchered that too much, but we can see they've got a really bad first input delay, and they've got a really poor larger contentful paint. So you can see from there, we start to benchmark that. So what I've done is try to find some of those issues that we saw in that study and try to show you kind of what I think some of these issues are coming from. So the first one from Lequip, these have a really bad cumulative layout shift. And a good way to illustrate this is to show you how that page loads in. So 1, 2, 3, those images is kind of the life cycle of that page. So we can see in number 1, it loads in the header and the footer of the mobile website. Fine. In the second image, it goes away and loads in a list of links. So I'm not going to try and do confiance. That's me trying to pronounce French. You can see it loads in that list of links there, and you've got some kind of different, like messaging and ads there. Then suddenly in that third part, it loads in an image that pushes all of that content down as well as a banner. Now, what that means is that you think if you wanted to click, like we think about, go back to that dog example, if you wanted to click on one of those links, you'd end up clicking either on a cookie thing or you'd end up clicking on the image. So clearly that is causing a large amount of layout shift, and these scored really badly for layout shift. So how would we go away and fix this? Well, what you do is you'd make sure that rather than loading in those links in number 2 first, you'd load in the image at the top, because what that means is the image at the top would load in, you could load the links underneath that, and it's going to shift everything around. Another one here from Metro.news. So this site was actually looked really fast, but we noticed that it had a really poor, larger contentful paint. And actually what this was caused by was the animation. So you can see how this works. 1, 2, 3. The first bit, it loads in the header. The second part, the page is loaded in, but it starts to fade it. Now, actually what's happening here is that it's scoring you against the page as it fades in, which obviously isn't going to be, if you are using this kind of technology where you are fading in web pages, then you have to be aware that you're actually artificially inflating your LCP score. So maybe this is something that people need to shift towards. If they are using things with a fading in imagery, make sure that you don't do that. And this is very similar to the South China Morning Post. Now you can see these do the layout shift really well. So they make space for the banner. They make space for the imagery. Nothing is moving around. But what is happening is that they're blurring in that image. And actually, yet again here, just like the previous example, it's not being scored until that image blurring is being finished. So yet again, make sure if you are using any fancy effects in your imagery, just don't do it, because it is going to start to impact your Core Web Vitals. So here is an example of some like classic CLS that I've seen. I think it's a website called Fresh Direct. So I'll let this GIF load in again, but hopefully you can see what happens. So the page loads in. You can see you get a picture of avocados, you can see sort, and then suddenly everything starts shifting around, and you can see how much that page shifts around as it loads in. Right at the end, it loads in a maintenance banner on the website as well, which also shifts the content around. So hopefully that page, I think, had a CLS of like 3, which is crazy high. But you can see as it loads in, that page is not stable at all. How do we go away, or how would we fix that? But what we'd make sure is that everything loads in the place it needs to be, and it's not shifting around. So it's a fairly simple recommendation from us as an SEO, but might be quite difficult for them to implement. But hopefully that's a good example of how you can go away and score CLS. With CLS, if you do want to get accurate scores, I would highly recommend using webpagetest.org. It gives you a video to watch, and it's something that's really easy to pass to developers. I can see there's loads of great questions coming through. I'll come back to them towards the end. Page speed insights. So focusing on large contentful paint and CLS and first input delay, it's not just always one issue. Like there can be things that artificially inflate it. So definitely don't just focus on how can I improve, make this image load faster. Actually, a lot of the time it can be due to other things like random JavaScript or things render blocking resources, reducing initial response time of the server. So don't ignore everything else in page speed insights. These will often have an impact on your Core Web Vitals. So that's a really important one to remember. And then, if you aren't tech savvy, you can just pass some of these recommendations over a developer, and hopefully they'll be able to start to implement them. But at the same time, I've known developers that when you pass them some of these page speed insights recommendations, they're a little bit, it falls on deaf ears. So another thing to think about that I've seen happen across quite a few websites is that remembering Core Web Vitals are scored by everyone. It's not just you, like sat in your office, like or you're using the UK. If you have a website that's from around the world, then all of your users will be kind of part of your Core Web Vitals metrics. So great way to kind of illustrate this is this one here. So we had a client that had a really poor, larger contentful paint, and we thought it looked fairly fast, but actually it was slow when we looked at the score. But what it turned out was that they had lots of people visiting from Australia because they're a recruitment firm and they're recruiting jobs in Australia, but they didn't have a content delivery network set up. So what this meant is that people in Australia were taking a very long time to download the initial part of the site. So I think it was taking up to 2 seconds for them to actually say hello to the server and have that time to first byte. So what I'll make sure is that if you do have a website that's getting traffic from all over the world, make sure you're using a content delivery network. Yeah, again, it's probably a bit more advanced, but make sure if you are doing it, do have a content delivery network, because that way you're going to make sure that everyone's getting it from the quickest way possible. Cool. So hopefully there's some of the common issues. Now, there's a couple of other parts with CLS that I see happening a lot. So plugins, WordPress plugins, Magento plugins, review plugins, banner plugins, live chat plugins. What a lot of them do now is cause real issues with CLS. So you go away and do a lighthouse test, and you can see that all these plugins are starting to cause a massive impact on your CLS. And you as a developer or anyone in digital marketing, you don't have a huge amount of control over those plugins because they're controlling it. You can't say, okay, can you change this? So hopefully what's going to happen over the next few months is that all of these developers of these plugins are going to start to actually pick up what they need to do and make these plugins load in a much friendly way. But if you are seeing that some of these plugins are causing an issue, make sure you chase those developers and start to get them to think about it, because they should be, because it's going to have a ranking impact. So next, showing a bit of my approach to the auditing process and how I think that we should go away and do that. So first bits first, like bog standard, go away, create your dashboard and identify common areas to improve. So go away, create this dashboard. This gives you kind of the first port of call to understand how everything's performing, and you get like a top overview. Next, start to drill into that dashboard, start to see if you do have issues, where they've come from. Like I mentioned earlier, go and understanding when issues start to crop up. It's a much easier conversation to have with the developer. You can say, okay, our largest contentful paint went down the toilet in February of last year. They can go, oh, okay, of February last year, I did this to the product page. We'd know from there, that's what they need to change. And that's a much easier conversation than having going to look back and go, dig around and see what happened, 6 months ago. Another really important one here, benchmark each template. So don't just go away. So go into PageSpeed Insights or Lighthouse or any of their software, and just in that auditing process, make sure you're understanding the scores of each individual page rather than the domain as a whole. So I've got a really rough example here, but you can see that I've gone for homepage, category, blog, product. Hopefully what they should let you spot is some problem areas, because you could work on the homepage, that could be great. But then if your category that you want traffic to land on isn't great, then that's where you really want to make sure that you're kind of focusing on, you have those scores and you've audited that. So that's something I definitely recommend to go away and do. Benchmark competitors. So like this tool that I showed you earlier, the Crux compare. This is an example of some tech websites that are selling a graphics card. You can see here that, say, I've compared 4 different URLs. So these are the landing pages for the 3070. And say if our client wanted to, benchmark themselves against that, we can think, okay, this is where you need to be. This is what your competitors are at. We know this is going to be a ranking factor. You need to kind of make sure you're alongside these guys and make sure you're having as good ranking as possible for here. As well as that, investigate. So I think you're using some of those measurement tools that I mentioned earlier. Make sure that you're, that when you go away and do this audit process, you're not just, you obviously can just give scores, but you do want to make sure you have a bit more kind of information there, because if you are going to developers or are talking to your team, then just investigating a bit more with some of those measurement tools is really useful, just to be able to show, a bit more knowledge. And I think this gives developers a much better place to start rather than just giving them kind of a blanket score and saying, can you fix this? So go in and investigate and do your own work is a really useful way to get buy-in from there. So this is an example of an audit that I did for a client, but just a kind of a rough one, just to show you what kind of one of my recommendations should look like. So cumulative layout shift, I've shown how that page is loaded. We can see that what's happened here in that page load, like the quick example, that the percentages have been, they were there, and then suddenly the banner image loaded in right at the end of the page, it shifted all that down, and it's got a huge amount of layout shift. So we show the developer that. They go away, we can show them the individual divs that are kind of, or elements that are contributing to that layout shift. And then after that, we've done our work and we can just go, go and fix it. Hopefully go and fix it anyway. Then after that, so we found the issues, we've gone away and fixed the CLS, we've gone and fixed our LCP, we think all our templates are going really fast now. Next thing we can do is measure. So over time, hopefully your graph's going to look like this. So this is a site we did some work for larger contentful paint on back in February, and you can see we did that work. And over time, green bar goes up. We all know that a bigger green bar means better. And hopefully that when those ranking updates are going to come around, that you get rewarded for it. Cool, right, so my key takeaways from this talk, they're coming in May 2021, so that is not long away. So if you haven't been looking at them now, I definitely recommend starting the auditing process to go through and make sure you are, have a really good idea of what your metrics are and start to get some implemented. We know that development queues can be, months or maybe a year sometimes. So try and make sure that you at least start to think about this, or at least got an idea of how your scores are. Use the data you have available. You don't need, to make custom dashboards or custom queries. Like, this is something that the data is freely available, and Google give you lots of ways to query it. Try to understand the issues. I've got 1, 3, 4, 5 there. That doesn't work, does it? Try to understand the issues behind the scores. So make sure that you are providing a bit of insight if you are talking to people around it and not just sending scores over. And then a final point, which I think is really important. So content is still king. So whilst this is going to be a ranking factor and it will give you a ranking boost, Google have been pretty clear saying that it's not going to be a silver bullet, and it's not going to be, it's not going to overwrite your content. So if you have, you spend a month making sure that your website is lightning fast, but your content is still really poor, then that isn't quite the right priority. The way I think about Core Web Vitals is kind of complementing what you have, and kind of, it's adding to that. So I guess, it's not, don't just focus on this as your one thing for the next 6 months. Have it as like an ongoing project alongside the other content work you're doing on the site. I think that's a really important one, because I know people can get stuck in these scores quite significantly. Cool, right, questions. So I've got a lot of questions going through the chat, so hopefully I'm going to start to go through them now. There we are. So Papillon Communications. Is the CLS something we are in control of, or is this within your design? So it depends where you're at, like where you sit in a team, but generally the people that have control of the CLS are the developers. So a designer will give a developer a design, and then a developer will build it in a certain way. But if the developer's built that in a way that that design shifts around a lot when it's loaded in, then that is on the developer. So definitely CLS is something developers, and us, like me as an SEO, I should be communicating that we have issues there. Ashish, what about Firefox, Safari, and built-in browser on mobile devices? Actually, I'm not too sure where that was, where that's come from. So feel free just to elaborate on that, and I'll make sure I answer it. There is an emphasis on what affects negatively towards CLS, what elements don't. So with CLS, the way that I recommend going and tackling that is literally just do the lighthouse test that I showed you earlier. And within that lighthouse test, you can just go away. So I'm just going to come back. Go back. Yeah. Sorry for clicking through the slides so fast. If you see that lighthouse test there, where that GIF is now, you can see there all the elements that are contributing to the layout shift. So you can run the lighthouse test and say, okay, hello developer, these are the 5 elements that are causing the layout shift. Can you go away and fix this? Bioregional, does Core Web Vitals only impact mobile search results? Are your rank will be penalized, or is that the boost only occur on mobile? So I'm thinking that it's the boost is only occur on mobile search results. So you won't see a difference on desktop search, which I guess makes sense. I mean, I ask clients now where there is kind of a fair bit of difference between those two rankings, and sometimes it changes around. But maybe this might cause maybe a wider gap. Maybe if you're a website that has really good Core Web Vitals and your competitors don't, you'll see a ranking boost on mobile. But I think that'd be something interesting when it is rolled in to kind of get some more data on that. Lex, yeah, I think I answered that earlier. Colin, are these custom dashboards or default? Yeah, again, they're all default. Nothing is custom. We can all get it off the shelf using some of those links that I've put there. What is the most accurate way to get field data? So you can use BigQuery. Now, I'm happy to kind of pick that up as a separate conversation, but kind of like BigQuery, Google let you use BigQuery to query the database, the Chrome user experience report, and get all that data back. So that's how we did that study. We queried the database for all those websites. Now, you're not going to get field data for every single URL, but that makes sense, because if Google had field data for every single URL, that would mean every single URL on your site had visits, which a lot of them don't. So really, I just focus on your main URLs here. Stefan, by the way, Google updates the Core Web Vitals data and GSC only once a month. That means if you fix issues, it takes a long time to see the results in Google Search Console. Which tools do you recommend to get this data just in time? So to get that data just in time, I'd do your own testing in the Lighthouse test. So use some of those tools that we went through earlier. And then over time, over time, you should be able to see that come through. Again, apologies for kind of firing around here. But over time, you'll be able to see it start to have an impact on here. So for the instant kind of, to check it instantly, use a lighthouse test in Chrome. And then after that, go away and measure it in the Chrome User Experience Report to see how that's actually impacting your real users. Oh, lots of good questions. I'm loving this. So this is that's actually something I'm not too sure about. I don't know that. So for example, so we know that Microsoft have announced their new browser. I think it's Edge or whatever it is, and they use Chromium now. So I don't know if that Chromium version, because the Microsoft browser is now very similar to Chrome, is that sending data back through to Google as well? I think that's something that maybe we'll have to look into a bit more. But I mean, the vast majority of people are on Chrome anyway. Is there a plugin, WordPress Rocket, that can handle a portion of the issues? You're not access the developer. So there's probably a plugin that can optimize your imagery to make your images load faster, which will make the large contentful paint quicker if that's what your images are, the element that's being used. But generally, I think a lot of this is kind of going to have to be developer work, and a plugin can't do a lot of the heavy lifting because, well, I think the plugins are generally the cause for a lot of these issues anyway. So maybe it's actually turned the plugins off that can probably help it. But yeah, I generally try and steer away from plugins that promise these things, because you can see some of this CLS stuff is fairly technical. And then finally, thanks. I'm mainly interested for designing new websites and trying to understand how to design each page. So do accordions, for example, do they affect CLS negatively? Shifting the user input? No. So CLS is only measured on the first load. Anything that happens after that doesn't contribute to it. It's basically that point of where you load in that initial viewport, how much is shifting around while the user isn't clicking, what it loads in. So anything in terms of interactivity after that initial load, you don't need to worry about that. Cool. I really enjoyed doing that. I thought that was a good session. Thank you for asking questions. It's nice to know that people were kind of listening. I think it was 70 people. That's crazy. Yeah, so I think that is, can I get to my thank you slide? There we go. No questions. Thank you. There we go. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, if anyone has any questions or anything around Core Vitals, please feel free to drop me an email. I'll definitely pick it up. Give me a follow on Twitter, because I'm starting to make it happen on Twitter now. Yeah, Helen, what I'll do is I'll probably put this blog out on I'll put this talk out on a blog and put a blog post along with it as well. So yeah, I'll make sure there's some follow up from this as well. Amazing. Right, thanks everyone. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Bye. Yeah, I'll send the links, Margot. I think it's Margot. Yeah, I'll make sure I send all the links as well. I'll put that in the blog post. Bye.